Good morning. I'm Dr. Gus Penix, President of the Nicholas County Board of Education. I'd like to welcome everyone to this special meeting of the board, the June 23rd, 2022 meeting, and I'm calling it to order at this time. Would you please rise and join the board in a moment of silent reflection. It gives us the opportunity to reflect on those things for which we have to be thankful, but also to clear our hearts and minds for the business we're going to talk about here today. So, a moment of silent reflection, please. Thank you. Would you please join the board in saluting our country with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Item 3 on this morning's agenda is the approval, our action items. Approval of the 22-23 coaching pay scale. This has to be approved according to policy annually because it's based upon the participation of students in each sport, and so we approve that annually. Are there any questions for the superintendent in regard to the approval of the coaching pay plan for 22-23? Hearing none. Item B is approval to renumber Nicholas County Board of Education policy FGC-BBB to Neola policy 1520-01. This is just renumbering a policy. It's not a change in the policy. Are there any questions in regard to renumbering the policy FGC-BBB to Neola policy 1520.01? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve action items A and B as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Amick moves. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Mrs. Kaufman seconds. Any further discussion in regard to action items A or B? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Madam Secretary, the motion passes unanimously. Item 4 on this morning's agenda is a consent item in regard to supplements and transfer to clear up items before the end of the fiscal year. And Mr. Hess, would you come forward?
I handed out the supplement that we'd like to ask the board to approve, including the last one for the fiscal year. We received a $5,000 grant from West Virginia Online Speech to be budgeted to stipends, and these were $5,000.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hess in regard to those supplements? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving consent item A, excuse me, I'm sorry, do I have a motion to approve consent item A?
So moved.
Mr. Berry moves. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Mr. Amick seconds. Any further discussion in regard to the supplements and transfers? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Madam Secretary, the motion passes unanimously. Item 5 is a work session with guest speakers today to discuss the FEMA-funded school building projects with Nicholas County schools. And we are fortunate to have with us, I want to introduce our guests at this time. We're fortunate to have with us, to my left, on this side, we have the School Building Authority. And with us, we have Mr. David Roach, Executive Director. We have Dana Womack, Director of Architectural Services. And we have Christina Dice, and she is FEMA Compliance Manager for the School Building Authority. At the table in the center, we have our architectural firm represented by Mr. Dave Ferguson and Mr. Chris Campbell. To my right, we have with us people from the State Board of Education. Mr. Clayton Birch, State Superintendent, is with us. Heather Hutchins, Chief Legal Counsel for the West Virginia Department of Education. And we have with us Michael Whitlow. He's the Director of School Facilities for the state of West Virginia. We are going to go through a format. The board had submitted a number of questions, 9 questions in total, and each of those, some of those questions have multiple parts to them. So we're going to go through those, and they will answer those. We're fortunate to have our guests with us today for a period of time, but they do have busy schedules, and we're going to try to get through all these questions and get them answered. At the end of that, we will, if there's time, we will take some questions from the audience, and they will be submitted in written form. At that time, I'll make available to you a form that you can fill out. You have to put your name on there, who the question's for, and your actual question, and we'll take those questions as we can. So, anything else, Madam Superintendent?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's begin with our questions, and I'll just start, and this goes to anybody at our guest tables here. Our superintendent presented information stating to remain in compliance with the governor-sponsored mediated agreement, the state board approved CEFP plan, the West Virginia School Building Authority approved plan, and the FEMA 428 plan, that the Career Center cannot stay in Craigsville. That's according to those agreements I just read off. The Career Center must move to the new school site location at Glade Creek to form the new Nicholas County High School as a comprehensive school. If the Nicholas County Board does not follow through with this plan, they will be in violation of the agreement, and $42 million would be de-obligated. Is that accurate?
I'm David Roach again. It's nice to be here, and I'll kind of be speaking for the School Building Authority at any time. State Superintendent would like to add or jump in, or Chief Legal Counsel for the State Board would be my guest. I don't want to dominate this or think I have all the answers, but I'll speak for the SBA. And we have written our questions or answers out, and anybody would like to request this, could just send me an email, and you could probably supply, if you would, anyone in the audience with this information, and I'll be glad to supply this document that I'm reading from. And I'm trying to read from it because I know there's been some information out there, and we're just trying to correct everything. If you put it in writing, it's forever there, and forever anyone that wants to look at it, it shouldn't change at all. So my answer to your first question, both the mediated agreement and the scope of work agreed upon within the Section 428 agreement indicate that an integrated career and technical education facility will be co-located within the Somerville Middle School and the Nicholas County High School. This is the Glade Creek facility. Failure to comply with legally binding mediation and the scope of work approved within the Section 428 agreement and the PW violates the requirements of the program and will result in a loss of project funding for work not complete or work completed outside the scope of work and applicable agreements. The 428 funding was specifically based on a comprehensive high school, not a standalone CTE center.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to question number 2. If the Nicholas County Board of Education wants to make a major change to the in the 428 plan, the scope of work, such as school grade configuration, in other words, making the Glade Creek campus a K through 8 instead of a high school, and Career Center and middle school, or school site location changes, relocating Ridgewood High School, middle school, off of the approved Cherry River site. If either of those changes were to occur. Number 1, would this require a change in the governor-sponsored mediated agreement? And if so, what is involved in this process?
Yes, the mediated agreement would be very difficult to change. This would require an amendment to the mediated document. This would require board approval and amendment to the CEFP. FEMA was also asked, just to be clear, if the 428 agreement could be amended. Could it be? The answer to this question is a flat no.
Okay, thank you. I have a question, and with the same considerations of the items I just mentioned. Number 2, would this require a change in the West Virginia State Board-approved CEFP? If so, what is involved in the process? These may be moot questions after the answer to that one, but if this would this require a change in the West Virginia State Board-approved CEFP?
The answer would be yes, and I would go back to question 1. The 428 cannot be amended. And 428 is a kind of embrace the mediated agreement and the CEFP plan, both of those compiled the 428. So a change in any of those two that you referred to would alter the 428. When you alter the 428, the funding would be deobligated.
I think the same as for the next 2 questions, would this require a change in the West Virginia School Building approval, Building Authority approval, and then would this require a change in the 428 plan scope of work? I think you've answered both of those sufficiently. Is there anything else anyone would like to add? The next question, what are the potential financial obligations of the Nicholas County Board of Education if a major change in the 428 plan scope of work is to occur? And we list several items there: failure to meet adequate progress, failure to meet milestones, and change in the current architectural contracts. So what would the potential financial obligation of the Nicholas County Board of Education be if any of those were to occur?
First of all, FEMA funding would be deobligated. The $175 million plus, they would take what is left back from, the 428, and would nullify it, and all previous reimbursements made to the county would have to be returned. So the county would owe the money, and I think roughly, if my understanding, we're at 16.9 specifically $1 million that Nicholas County would have to return if the 428 agreement was violated, and they would deobligate the funds.
And that would, in those 2 areas there, are both part of the 428 plan, meeting milestones and meeting the adequate progress. So those are
correct, and that is ongoing, and it's contingent upon the timelines are contingent upon meeting the milestones, and those cannot be violated either. And just a footnote, they've already kind of left one of the phases, and now, if my understanding, they're in the closeout phase as far as FEMA is concerned. So we have different members of the FEMA team, both regional and local, that are now on the closeout team. We are no longer with the other team. That's how far they've advanced, and they're changing the people.
To the architectural firm, you have already made designs on certain buildings. If we go back and do a redesign of those, would those would not be covered by FEMA, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the county would be obligated to pay those funds out of pocket?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, the superintendent has stated that the enrollment numbers that established the size of the new school was based on policy 6200, current and projected enrollment, that established a justification document that helped develop the governor's-sponsored mediated agreement, and also the CEFP and the West Virginia School Buildings Authority's approval and FEMA and the development of the 428 plan. The document called to allow student choice in school selection by open boundaries with bus transportation for secondary students. The question is, can the Nicholas County Board of Education remove school choice options, necessitating the need for different school and grade configurations, while remaining in compliance with the governor's-sponsored mediated agreement and the other areas that we talked about, including the 428 plan? This might be to the states. And that would be to, can we remove school of choice options?
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the process whereby the information was presented to FEMA, throughout the mediation process, school choice was always a contemplation. In fact, it was embedded within the final mediation agreement, that was part of the mediated agreement. Additionally, when the State Board of Education approved the CEFP plan, the school choice option was a significant part of that plan. The reasoning behind it being that families need to have the opportunity to do what is best for them. Because there is a comprehensive high school in the Summersville area, currently proposed to be at the Glade Creek site, that would, eliminating school choice would eliminate opportunities for families to attend and participate in those CTE programs that may be very beneficial for their careers and their life. Changing that would change the CEFP that was approved by the state board and be contrary to the mediated agreement.
Anyone else on that question?
Other than kind of the same thing, the FEMA funding would be deobligated if that occurred.
If, this is a question for any one of you, if the Nicholas County Board of Education is working outside of the compliance of the agreements, the aid agreement, et cetera, what is the result? And I think, first of all, it's the deobligation of funds. That would be the most serious situation. Anything else?
Yes, the potential litigation brought by the affected families and citizens if this could occur, going back to what Heather said, and the West Virginia Board of Education, can't speak for them, of course, but the possible intervention, if that would occur, rejection of the new CEFP, there's just a lot of potential there that, we do not know and can speculate for sure, but the potential is there for litigation.
Anyone else? The West Virginia School Building, or can you just talk about the West Virginia School Building Authority being the applicant for this project?
Yes. There's a code, and I have it on my phone. And there's also, we have an SBA policy. And in 2016, I think the governor at the time, and I know the Director of Architectural Services and the Executive Director signed an agreement that the governor at that time wanted the money to pass through the SBA because we already have the SBA schools and we monitor the construction, and they didn't want to give it directly to the counties. And that was both Kanawha and Nicholas. And so the FEMA made us the applicant. A lot of times it is like it is currently in West Virginia, but in other states, the county is the applicant. But that was the rationale, that we were the applicant and you were the sub-applicant. So we have to approve things. That's why it comes from us or from the county, pass through us. We give it to WIM, West Virginia Emergency Management, and then they pass it on to FEMA. And then it comes right back down the cycle again for the answers, if we do not know the answers. So it was set up that way, and other than that, I don't have any other reason, but they wanted to make sure we monitored the construction part of it.
And thank you for emphasizing there the chain by which things have to pass through, going up, and then they have to come back through the same channels back then. It's not a matter of just desiring to do something one day, we do it the next. It has to go through a channel in this process.
Yes, and it has to meet all the approval. And sometimes, it doesn't, we can say yes and we can say no. A lot of times we pass it on up because we're not sure. And the same thing for the West Virginia Emergency Management team. But FEMA always has the final answer to our questions.
Thank you. Third question, does the Nicholas County Board of Education have $177.5 million in our bank account? And can you explain the drawdown process? I think you've gone through that. We do not have $177.5 million in our bank account. Some may think that. It is totally a drawdown process.
It is a drawdown process and it's reimbursed. So we have to have justification to give the money to the county. And it goes through the OASIS process, and if it's not agreed upon by all of us, and it goes up the chain, same thing, then it's not reimbursed. So it'd be very difficult, I think there's another question somewhere, for anyone to take any money at all, because it is a reimbursement process.
Superintendent's asking you to explain, to talk about the chain again. It starts with us to you.
Yes, then it goes, we pass it on. See, we cannot bypass WIM, which is part of Homeland Security, West Virginia Emergency Management. They have a team that we send all our correspondence to, so it comes from the county. We read it. There may be changes to it, may not. May sign my name, may not. It may pass right on through us, but we're aware of it. Then we send it on to the WIM, and then WIM sends it to FEMA. And then it comes right back to chain again. We do not see it until WIM sees it. They pass it to us, then we pass it back to whomever at this level, superintendent and or legal counsel, or whomever it will be addressed to.
Okay. And that does take time. People don't seem to understand that those steps take time. And
They do.
each agency has their process of review before they send it back down. Again, it's not an immediate action, just straight up the ladder and straight down. So,
Correct.
okay, thank you, sir. Well, again, this is about the reimbursement process of invoices that come into us. We have a contractor who does work for us, and he does that on his own, and then he submits an invoice to us, and we pay him after the work has been done. And so are there any other things that you would comment in regard to that reimbursement process? We know it has to go back up the ladder and back down, and there's another step I think you mentioned in there about OASIS.
Yes, our state financial system. I would like to go ahead and read this for the audience's sake, in case I left something out. The county creates a requisition form that attaches invoices from the vendors. This request for reimbursement is sent to the SBA. The SBA reviews these documents for compliance and completeness, which is where Chrissy comes in. The SBA then sends a funding request to West Virginia Emergency Management. This request is reviewed by them and the governor's office. After review by all parties, funds for the amount requested are deposited in the OASIS, and the state financial system, and transfers generated to the county in that amount. FEMA conducts their review of all documents for the project at closeout. This is when the final determination is made for the eligibility of the reimbursement. So not everything I said goes to FEMA doesn't go to FEMA, but at the end, they go through, and sometimes it's 3 years after the completion of the project. They look for anything. If it cannot be justified, they go to the county for justification. And if they can't, we'll try to furnish it. If we don't have it, and it can't be justified, then the county pays that expense. That's why it's very, very important that we have all the process of every entity review those reimbursements or requisitions. It's critical because you could lose $1 million in a heartbeat if you're not paying attention. And I asked the governor or our state, our chair, Mr. Brian Abraham, to have a FEMA team. And at one time, we had 4 folks only dedicated to these 2 counties. And now we have about 1.5, because we have the routine down, we know what is expected, but it was a lot of training. And I know the counties went through a lot of training to understand what is required for justification. And it is a lot of work, but it's very important work, because we don't want the county to have to pay money back, when I may be long gone and many people be long gone, we still have to pay that money back to FEMA. if it's not justified.
I thank you for bringing into the discussion the other part about the auditing, which occurs 3 to 5 years afterwards. And we're thankful for the process that we have checks and balances going up, so that we don't have that problem at the very end. So that is extremely important, and it adds credence to the fact that we need to have, it takes time to review those documents as they go up through. Currently, does the Nicholas County Board of Education have missing FEMA funds?
To our knowledge, we have no missing FEMA funds. Again, it's reimbursement. It'd be very difficult. The local level, nor us can get our hands on any FEMA money without the requisition coming from you all the way up and back to the contractor. So I'm sure it's been done somewhere. I mean, but I don't know how it could be done based on what I've seen. You would vouch for that?
And the system of checks and balances would really catch anything like that, reimburse those things as missing funds. Can you discuss we talked about the audit process and the final audit, the conclusion of the project. We know that that's going to occur 3 to 5 years. That's a definite. They do all projects that way at the federal level.
Correct.
Other levels, but
And they go through all our documents, and they look for justification or ask for it, and we just hope, that we have everything in place. And we tried to, again, she's been through a lot of training, and many others have too, to make sure the counties nor us can protect the WIN and the governor and everybody, the SBA, from being embarrassed because we missed something. And I hate to have my name tarnished after I'm long gone. That's why everybody's so careful, because we know it could amount to a lot of money. And there's no recourse. If they say you owe it, you owe it.
According to the West Virginia State Purchasing 7.2.21 negotiation, when all bids exceed available funds, the government construction contracts, supplies, and materials are exempt from this negotiation method. This prohibits the Nicholas County Board of Education or its superintendent from negotiating on bids that exceed their budget. Is that accurate? That would probably be a State Department question.
Yes.
Oh, SBA, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Always look for anyone else. Yes, FEMA requires that the strictest code be adhered to, whether it be the state, county, or federal. State code advises that all bidders shall be afforded the opportunity to provide the best final offer. In essence, you cannot negotiate, period. It doesn't allow it. State purchasing does not allow that.
It's for county school boards. Yes. FEMA does not pay for the same work twice. We kind of covered this with the architect a few moments ago. If FEMA pays for the first set of design documents and the project focus is changed, requiring a second set of design documents, the second set of design documents would be at the expense of the Nicholas County Board of Education, and I think Mr. Ferguson, you said correct. What would be the cost for a second set of design documents if the Glade Creek site is changed to a K-8 school minus the Career Center?
It's a little more complicated than just a quick answer. If we knew the enrollment, we could probably figure it out pretty quickly. I would say it's going to be, it won't be as much as what we have currently, because it's a different project. It would be in the range of probably $1 million range, something like that, depending on enrollment, because it's all based on the current SBA rules and guidelines on how all that was figured in the beginning.
And that would be at the expense of the board?
Yeah, the expense of the board, yes.
Because they're not going to pay for a
They
second.
did not pay for that twice, correct.
The following questions are for any of the three of you. The desire of some is to change the scope of work, and I know we're kind of reiterating some of the same things over and over again, but they bear repeating for clarity and understanding of what is going on. The desire of some is to change the scope of work from the current Glade Creek site from a new comprehensive high school with a new career center and a new Summersville Middle School for the mediated agreement. Change the site to a new Summersville Middle School and a new Summersville Elementary School and leave the career center in Craigsville where it's currently located. What would this mean in terms of the change in the scope of work, the design? And I think you talked about the cost of that, and us making adequate progress.
It would pretty much slow us down quite rapidly. It would take about a year to design a new school, and all of the site amenities would change, all of the site design would change as well. And you would also have to change the scope of work at the FEMA level, and I don't know what that would entail.
Anytime you change the scopes of work, violates the 428 agreement. And again, that was pretty clear with the FEMA regional, I don't know his title, but he's gone now, I mean, as far as on the team. But it was, he said without hesitation, no, could not do it.
From the perspective, if I may, Dr. Penix, from the perspective of the State Board of Education, that scope of work also fundamentally changes the approved CEFP, and the county would not be able to proceed with that plan until the CEFP amendment was presented to the State Board, and the question would be for the State Board ultimately to approve any potential amendment or not.
What consequences would the Nicholas County Board of Education face should a change in the SOW, the scope of work of this magnitude be pursued? Loss of funding, repaying monies already spent, state takeover of the county school system, et cetera. Those are all things in there. I think what's been very clear would be the obligation of funding, and it would be a loss of funding, repaying monies back, some $16 million that have already been expended, and potentially the state would take over the school system, et cetera. Is that a possibility?
Those are all possibilities. Of course, we cannot speak on behalf of the State Board as the question has not been presented to them, but the county is well aware from having been previously involved in litigation regarding the CEFP. It is the State Board ultimately that does have the authority to approve or reject any change that the county would offer.
Okay, I'm reaching the end of our questions here, and this may focus more to the State Department of Education. The new comprehensive high school that is being designed with a totally new concept of education for students. It's the academy approach. This approach moves from the traditional education of students to a focus on having all students prepared when they leave our schools. We want them to be certified to do some type of work, be it cleaning, running cash register, doing those types of things. We want every child certified to be able to do some type of work, or we want them credentialed or licensed in some type of trade skill, and or thirdly, prepared for advanced training in higher education or a specified skills training area, and also an associate degree program. We feel that this is, as a board, that this is extremely important for our citizens. Setting aside all things that are differences in the county, our focus must be on the kids and their future. And that's what this whole educational concept has been about. Not dividing, but providing for the proper education for our students. And so, and with that in mind, what are your thoughts on this approach, Mr. Superintendent?
Well, Dr. Finks, as you know, we have some of the most robust career technical education centers and comprehensive high schools around. When the CEFP was presented to the state board, this approach was presented to the state also. And it was a major part of what was presented to the state board. But ultimately, what the state board looks at is, does the county meet policy 2510? And which is the focus on a high quality education system, preparing our youth for the future. It is innovative, it is different, but ultimately, The state board, as well as the Department of Education, respected Nicholas County's local Board of Education to take that approach. It meets all the parameters. It does push the limits on what maybe the future of career technical education can look like in the state. But we were very pleased when we saw the approach during the CFP presentation.
The second part of that, second question of that is, do you find it beneficial in moving West Virginia forward and potentially creating opportunities for business to locate here in our area and keep our kids in our county and in our state? Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. Every local county school board should be looking exactly at what the needs of not only the state, the nation are, but also their local economy. And we want all of our career technical centers, our comprehensive high schools, to be responsive to the needs of the future. So looking at an academy approach, or however you look at a career technical center, whether it be standalone or in a comprehensive high school, you've got to be able to put yourself in a position to where you are meeting the demands. If you're not willing to meet the demands of the future, you're going to have a hard time bringing businesses that want to locate. Many businesses coming right now, if you follow our Department of Economics or Department of Commerce, they are now asking those questions. They want to know where the career technical centers are, both at the high school, the two-year colleges, and they also are asking a lot of questions such as, is that career technical center or high school willing to adapt to meet our needs also?
Thank you. That's very beneficial, I think, to the offerings we're giving to our kids, but also making sure that they're ready for those other areas of work or further education. So, at this time, I'd like to read something. This is from, was provided this morning from Delegate Heather Tully, and I'll read a statement, and she does have a question there. Let me be the first to welcome you both back to Nicholas County, or all of you back to Nicholas County, and I'm sorry that I cannot be present. I am in Orlando, Florida, to attend the American Association of Nurse Practitioners National Conference and to accept the AANP Advocate State Award for 2022. My attendance at the conference was scheduled long before this meeting came to fruition. I advocate for causes that I believe to be worthy of my time and will promote the future of my district and our state. Additionally, my husband and I have 5 elementary school-aged grandchildren that attend public schools in Nicholas County. I have always been a strong advocate in the reconfiguration and reconstruction of our schools in Nicholas County. I'm a strong proponent of the comprehensive high school concept and feel implementation of this model is crucial to the future success of our students in Nicholas County. She has a question, and it's, do you plan to adhere to the mediated agreement as closely as possible to ensure our students have the best opportunity to access the career and technical education offerings in a comprehensive high school setting? That's a question. Staying with the mediated agreement. I think we all agree that we must have a mediated agreement, I think. We are obligated to the mediated agreement. Okay, at this time, we will offer opportunity if you would like to ask a question to any of these people. There are papers that you can fill out your question in the back.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
To the FEMA representative. We say the mediated agreement can't be changed, but yet we constantly change it by scope of work changes. We have just recently tried to reduce the plans to a minimum 6,200 specifications. So why do we say that we can't file an amendment to a court-ordered document and have that changed? If we have to, is there not some type of a hardship clause? We're facing a deficit of up to $50 million projected. What can we do?
Yeah, he's asking you if
Well,
you can answer it.
The mediated agreement, you have to say within the scope of work. Making a significant change outside the scope of work and outside the mediated agreement is different than just scaling back a bit to stay within budget. The The meat is the scope of work, and the details within the mediation agreement and the CEFP.
But I could give you an example that may make it more clear. I think it's Richwood Middle, Mr. Ferguson, that we scaled back, or you all did, the auditorium seating or the gym seating, and that, if you eliminated the gym, let's say, or you eliminated the auditorium, you're changing the scope of work. Because you're offering an auditorium and you're making adjustments to the side, is not really changing the scope of work in their eyes. But if you eliminated the auditorium to cut costs, that's a change in scope in their view.
And things such as changing a location can require, the environmental studies on these locations can take a year and a half to do. So changing a location is an extreme change, and it will cause major delays, and we are already on the conditional time approvals.
The proposal includes modifying the Nicholas County High School to move in the Summersville Elementary School. Will that be covered by FEMA funds? It has been estimated, I believe, at about $1.6 million. Is that covered by FEMA funds?
Is that in the current 420 agreement, is within the scope of the current 420 agreement, or is that a new proposed change?
It's not. I'm not sure. Could you rephrase what you're asking?
I'm asking if the revision of Nicholas County High School to accommodate Summersville Elementary will be covered by FEMA funds. We have been told that it will.
That it will?
Yes.
Yeah. The Summersville Elementary is
I'm
not
asking-
part of that
I'm
scope of
asking.
work. Okay, but if you're saying Summersville Elementary, Summersville Middle School and Summersville Elementary is two different things.
Nicholas County High School will be modified to move in Summersville Elementary.
Oh, that one.
Will it
That's
be
in the
covered by
mediation
FEMA
agreement.
funding? That's what I'm asking. We have been told that it will.
Okay. Yeah, if it's within the agreement, the 428 agreement, it will be covered under the FEMA funds. It has to just stay within the scope of the 428 agreement.
Mr. Bishop, I'd like to help address that question. This Director of Architectural Services, Mr. Dana Womack, he may help a little bit. He has some information maybe help.
Sir, I believe, I will definitely double check it, but I believe there is $2 million allocated in the PW for renovations to the high school to move the elementary school kids in the existing Nicholas County High School. So that money will cover them renovations.
But now, for clarification, there is no way to change the agreement.
We cannot amend, and this is FEMA's words, cannot amend the 428 agreement, and that would be an amendment, is what you're asking for.
Not even if it's approved by the state board. Under
I'm
no
pretty sure,
circumstances.
let me show you, I think the 428 signed, and I think our chair signed it, I signed it, I'm not sure did the state board sign the document, but it is a contract. And the CEFP and the mediation agreement made up that 428. Even if you change the CEFP, we still have that contract that we signed, and it overrides, I think, the change in the CEFP. So if that wouldn't make a difference in FEMA's mind, because they're very clear to say, if you amend the 428, it's a no. You cannot amend it. And to me, again, I'm not an expert, but that would be amending the 428, what you're asking.
So we are responsible for any extra funding beyond the funding of FEMA. That's what it says in the agreement. So
Yes, sir.
if we are $50 million over, and that's what's projected, then we are responsible for that if we maintain the current plan. But yet we have no way to get out of it.
I don't know if you're talking about the redesign of the square footage, is that the current plan that you're 50 million over? Or are we talking about the first drawings?
The projected cost of these, to both sites,
I'm not sure though which.
is approximately 50 million over what we had anticipated.
Is
From
the-
mine? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, is the $50 million, Mr. Moose, you're referring to in relation to the bids we received on the Ridgewood project, and you're just anticipating that much more over? And that's what it's based on, and we rejected that bid. Mr. Ferguson, we didn't, I don't know, we said $50 million or?
No, that, if you're using those budgets, those are the budgets that we previously had for, before we started cutting square footages and backing the projects down to 6,200 policy. So, and like we said at our previous board meeting this week, or the previous one before that, you can't use those square foot costs for the Richwood School. It's not the same square foot cost as on the Glade Creek School. It's just not going to be the same cost based on type of materials, size of building, a lot of factors. And we're in the process of reducing those schools back down to that policy. So once we get that completed, we will have new budgets to work with.
And, no one foresaw what happened in late February with the situation in Europe. No one saw the economy, the inflation, the type of things that are happening. No one has a crystal ball here to see what the future holds for the bids that are going to come in the future. So we really don't know that. So.
Right.
Then we have no option.
I only can speak for the SBA, and there is no money because we have the regular SBA schools that we have to look after in the same circumstance that Nicholas and all finds themselves into, funding.
So you don't anticipate us being able to get any more funding from the SBA?
No, sir. I think I've addressed, there's some, I don't know where the document came from, where we asked the questions of FEMA, and somebody asked me about funding from the SBA and funding from the governor. I said I can't speak for the governor, but because they did not give any additional money to Kanawha County, I do not believe they'd give any additional money, although I can never speak for the governor. And also, at that time, the legislature was not in session when I was answering those questions, so I can't speak for the legislature. I didn't ask or even know how to go about finding that answer out.
I get the impression that FEMA 428 is sort of a carte blanche. That's up to us, the way we spend the funding. So we're allowed to build schools that weren't touched by flooding, but yet we're not allowed to change the mediation agreement. Is that correct?
I can say that, only speaking because I'm not at the local level, that FEMA approved the local decisions at that time, and so that's approval by them. And as far as changing the 428 agreement, amending it, you cannot at this time. And again, I got that from the regional horse's mouth. Aaron Dinquist? Burkus. Aaron Burkus, out of regional, out of the Region 3.
But we can change scope of work. Is that correct?
No.
Cannot change scope of work.
But we do it all the time.
Well,
We've done it already.
Well, remember my example, and I don't know how, I'm not able to explain any better, but it's like if you had 9 offerings, hypothetical offerings of CTE at the new comprehensive high school. Because the way you deliver the program does not affect the scope of work. But if you started eliminating programs and only offered 6, you're changing the scope of work. That's another example. Again, I'm sorry I can't be more defining any better. I only can offer examples of what the difference is.
Okay, currently there are 14 programs
Right.
at the CTE. Now there will be 11. Is that changing the scope of work?
Depends on how they're delivered.
Thank you.
In the grand scheme of things, this board, some years back, we chose to go with the 428 plan because it offered several things. The option for us to gain more funding for our school system than to go with the traditional funding. The traditional funding, as explained by FEMA, we could have had funding to replace the 3 schools that were lost at their current enrollment, and we would be able to replace them doorknob for doorknob, window for window, et cetera, that type of thing. We chose to go with the 428 plan, which was very well explained to us that we can do other things, and as a result of us going with that, we expanded our funding that we would receive in this county by approximately $100 million. That also involved the negotiation with the federal government for the CTE site at the center. With that, receiving that type of funding, if we'd have gone traditional, we would have been able to affect 3 schools in Nicholas County. And as a result of going with this, we're now affecting 7 schools in our county. So it is the greater benefit to the county and the citizens of this county that we went with the 428 plan. And again, let me state, none of us saw what was coming in February, the inflation that's been created currently in this country. None of us saw that coming. But we did that in the best interest of our county, and again, we're affecting 7 schools in our county. Richwood High School, Richwood Middle, Cherry River Elementary, Nicholas County High School, Summersville Middle School, Summersville Elementary, and the Career Center. That's 7 of our 14 schools are affected by this funding. So we chose at that time, this board chose at that time to go with that option, and that's where we are today. In regard to the scope of work, the grand scope of work is what the mediated agreement states. We're going to have a comprehensive high school over here involving Summersville Middle, Nicholas County High School, and the Career Center. Now, if we go in and change the size within the building, let's say we go in and, as you said earlier, Mr. Rich, I think, if we reduce the size of the gym, or if we reduce the auditorium, or we expand or whatever on anything in that area, that is a change of the scope of work within the grand scope of work. But the grand scope of work is what we cannot alter. Am I stating that correctly? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The SBA, oh, excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
The SBA will have to approve these modifications to 6200 standards, is that correct?
I would assume we would have to check it out, yes, and send it up the chain. Right. You know,
I'm sorry.
it go to us and then go to WIM, West Virginia Emergency Management, and then I assume to FEMA to okay that. Yes.
And the state board? State board?
I don't think so, not for, no, I don't think so, but you want to address that?
Yes, I will. The type of modification that Director Roach is talking about, in reducing a footprint size, is not changing the CEFP, so that would not have to garner state board approval. That's correct.
Mr. Musso, you have another question?
No, sir.
I will move on now to I have 3 questions from the audience, and we'll take time to ask those. The first one's from Gary Roberts, and this is to anybody on the panel. Have any instances of fraud, waste, or excessive delays been noted on either school location?
Fraud, waste, or delays?
Are delays noted, been noted on either school location, those 3 areas?
We have no knowledge of fraud, of course. we have no knowledge of waste. And the delays have been documented with the extensions applied for to FEMA.
Okay. Delays have been documented with asking FEMA for extension.
Yes.
Thank you. The second question comes from Caleb Hanna. We've scaled back plans to the policy 6200 minimum standards. If these next bids don't come in at budget, where do we go from there? That's question number one.
If I can speak up to expand on
Just
that
a
question.
second. No, we're asking the questions here, and you state your question here, sir. Okay, where do we go? And anybody want to answer that? The only thing I can say is we have to wait and see what those bids come in, how they come in, and then the board at that time will have to determine where we're going. And can the legislature change state code to allow the super negotiation power on bids? I think it's, I don't know. And then Mr. Rhodes said possible intervention by the state is possible if litigation ensues. Can state intervention occur by the board's request?
That is a possibility. There have been instances where our state board has received requests for assistance and intervention. Intervention can occur on a number of levels. We have seen that sometimes it is not a full intervention into the operation of the county board. Sometimes there are limited interventions. For instance, there have been interventions in counties related solely to personnel or solely to construction and building. But again, that's a question that while we know that is a possibility, there certainly have been no discussions with the state board at this time to do anything, because the state board is still proceeding with the understanding that the CEFP that has been approved is in place. So there's no reason to do that at this time.
And I might add, with Delegate Hannah's question, I think would be the legislature has tremendous power, but I don't know if they have any power over that 428 agreement being signed where they could do anything to that document. That would be questionable because that's a federal document. I don't know if they've even recognized any state legislature or not, and any changes to that.
Third question is from Chip Perrine. It's to Mr. Roach. Can the Nicholas County Board of Education revisit the bid of $47 million for the Cherry River site and accept it?
You all may have more knowledge, and so speak up after I'm finished, because I'm sure you're better equipped than I am on the state board policy. But it's my understanding from state purchasing that once you a duly elected, board rejects a bid, that's it. A new board can't come in then. It would have to be rebid. You can't come back then and then accept the bid that's already been rejected, because then you would have lawsuits of unfair bidding practices or non-bidding practices, and you get open a can of worms, because everybody would want a piece of the apple at that point. Now, that's my understanding. Once it be rejected, it's final. Now, you got to start from the beginning again.
Anything further from the architectural firm?
That's our understanding.
That is all the questions I have at this time. There's no others. Let me take this opportunity. I want to thank our guests for being here this morning. Any other questions?
I would just like to make a statement. Today's the 6-year anniversary of the flood. It's been 6 years. I think it's time we move forward and get these schools built. We got the plans, and we need to do it. Get it done.
I would like to thank our guests for being with us today. The department, State Superintendent Birch, and School Building Authority, Mr. Roach, and our architectural firm, Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Campbell, for being with us to answer these questions. I think that you have given us some very definite answers that we can move forward with. I'm glad to say we have our 2 new board members in attendance with us this morning, so glad they had an opportunity to hear this. And I also want to thank the board for allowing me to serve as your president for the last 6 years. This is our last meeting of this fiscal year, but I look forward to serving the students and the citizens of Nicholas County as a board member in the future. So thank you for your time, and thank you all for coming today. Having conducted all of our business, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting this morning? Mr. Amick moves. Is there a second? Mrs. Kaufman seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Madam Secretary, we are adjourned at 11 a.m.